So, testnets. Well, as you're all aware, we hot forked last Wednesday. So there was a little issue with timestamps. I don't know if fork enable timestamps or something. That was solved kind of before the hot fork happened, and well, I guess we killed the chain for a few minutes, but that's not too bad. And then the hot fork went through smoothly, so that's great. Except it kind of introduced an issue where it was no longer possible to deploy contracts. So this was related to a bug in Nethermind, related to EIP. I don't know if it's 170 or 3860, but one of them basically. I think it's 170 because the it's not enabled at the same conditions as it on Gnosis as it was on mainnet. So there was an issue with that. So we took our time to test the fix on a new DevNet, make sure that everything worked as expected, and then 2 days later, on Friday, we updated all the Nethermind nodes, all the validators, everything. So it fixed itself with this update. And since then, everything seems to be working well. So I haven't personally been monitoring forks too much. But at least when we did the hard fork not the hard fork, the update on Friday, there weren't any forks left after that. So we didn't require a hard fork for this update because luckily what the Nethermind nodes did was not technically wrong. So they just didn't accept some transactions, but they didn't produce invalid blocks according to the spec. So we didn't have to do a specific hard fork. So that's great. So at least the network is the same. So the process is the same as for mainnet. So we didn't introduce something else. So that's great. And based on this, probably everything should be fine for mainnets. At least, well, there's no reason, I guess, at this point for anything to go bad. So I guess we'll start talking about setting a date for mainnets. But before that, well, first let's hear if someone had something else to add for DevNet. Okay, I'll take that as a no. So I guess everything was set. Yeah. So before talking about mainnet, I want to just talk about this really quick. So I posted this on the Telegram group already, but so there's this kind of issue, I guess, that withdrawals actually don't emit transfer events on the GNO ERC20 token, which is which should be the case according at least to ERC20. So yeah, I don't have the spec handy right now, but I guess you must emit transfer events if it's not a mint, which is no longer the case, which could break tools, right? So it could break explorers, or, well, of course, you can always do some specific condition or something to also add withdrawals to GNO, and then you can calculate it if you want. But it makes everything a bit more complicated. And some tools, like maybe the Graph or Dune, will no longer display the right amounts for everyone for GNO. So I don't have a complete list, but the Graph, for example, would index all the transfer events, and then with this build the list of addresses that own GNO. And this would now be incomplete. So the deposit contract would have too much, and all the addresses that would have received the withdrawal would have not enough GNO, and then potentially also use or transfer more GNO than they have, meaning they would go in a negative balance according to events and things like that, which might again break tools. So yeah, I guess this is just a small brainstorming session about if there's potentially something we can do about this, easily and quickly. And if not, I guess we'll have to go through the main to the mainnet hard fork without it. And if so, we should maybe analyze a bit what the drawbacks could be, basically. So yeah, does someone have anything to say about that? Yeah, go ahead, Lukasz.
So logs normally, because if we emitted logs, so events, right, would be fine. But logs normally are related to transactions, right? And the problem is that this is done in what we can call a system transaction, so not a normal block transaction. So we could emit a receipt for it, and it would have logs, but it won't have a transaction in block for this receipt, right? So it would be an artificial receipt, which is fine. But it might break few things. So for example, when we are syncing and we are downloading receipts, we expect the number of receipts to be the exact same as the number of transactions. But here it would be a different number, right? So there would be +1 receipts compared to transactions. So overall, it's doable, but it might have unforeseen consequences in other parts of the code. That's the complexity will like spill out, right? So I'm not sure if it's the best way to go forward. On the other hand, I don't see other easy way. So yeah, I have mixed feelings on this. Basically, we would have to have a receipt for that transaction.
All right, yeah. So if it breaks other things, then that makes testing a lot harder, and well, we would have to delay mainnets by a lot of time, I guess.
Yes. So it's doable, but right, it can break sync, it can break JSON RPC, or yeah, just things like that, right?
I'm 100% sure that we will need some changes in JSON RPC, for example, because as Łukasz said, we are making assumption that we have the same amount of transactions and receipts in JSON RPC, for example.
Right. Yeah, so I guess there's not much more to say. I guess it's unlikely that this ever happens. Knowing as well that, of course, this is not something we can fix later because we can't re-emit those events.
Okay, there's another way potentially, but it's also hacky.
Go ahead.
Right, so we can. I don't like this, so I'm not sure, but we could because this is basically ETH get logs, right? So we can inside the node, when someone calls ETH get logs, we can actually emit or save during block processing. Yeah, harder to save. Okay, we can emit in some way this kind of artificial logs that don't come from anywhere, right? But we are just return them based on the withdrawals in the block, right? So we can like make them up on the fly. But it's again a very hacky way of doing it, and I'm not sure if I like it. It would be only on the like JSON RPC level without touching any internal structures.
Right, that could be a solution, but then it also requires some quite specific code just for Gnosis, and then maybe we're deviating a bit more from the Ethereum spec, I guess.
Yeah, but that's only in this one place, right? It won't spill out to any other place in the client. So this is very, let's say, contained. It might have, I don't know, because we have very high optimizations patterns in our ETA get logs, so it might be hard to make this work well together. So it's, again, pretty hard. Marek?
But are you sure it's only about if get logs? Because from my understanding, it's about even having withdrawals in block structure. So, for example, someone can call if get block by number or by hash and download withdrawals, and he's 100% sure for mainnet, for Ethereum mainnet, that these withdrawals were applied. So even if we modify if get logs,
yeah, they might not have been applied. Okay.
Yeah, and but the other question is, how often do we expect in practice failing withdrawals on Gnosis mainnet? Because I understand that it is chain shouldn't stop if this happen, but is there any like normal situation that it will happen in practice?
We allowed it, so we need to assume it can happen.
Yeah, but so I doubt anyone will adjust RPC for Gnosis specifically based on this. So I'm not sure. Because if we do not have failing withdrawals, right, everything will work as for mainnet, right?
Not sure, because we are calling the contract, right? So not no. Depends what you mean.
So every RPC, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Question: how Dune and other indexers are extracting information about withdrawals today for mainnet?
It's not about withdrawals. It's about tracking ERC token.
Okay.
And
they do it from logs, from what I got it.
Yes, because technically, I guess with Dune and the graph, it would still be possible to, well, get those changes, but then you would have to do, like, on Dune, you would have to do some joint tables shenanigans to fetch logs from GNO and also withdrawals, and on the graph, you would have to go, I guess, through every block and inspect withdrawals in addition to tailing events. And then some platforms that just use ERC20 log tailing would also not work, like some that are less customizable, I guess, than the graph and Dune.
Yeah, so I think kind of the artificial receipts are the best way forward if we need to support this. But they are like potentially problematic in a lot of ways, like they spit out the abstraction. And yeah, I was just thinking, can we just add those transactions to the block? But no, we cannot, because they need to be generated on the on the node, because otherwise it would be a security risk. So unless we like add an, again, artificial transaction on the in the block that would actually be ignored, that would just mark a transaction that would later be generated on the node. But it's even more complicated to some extent, but maybe not that much. Yeah, so right, a bit of hacking to get there would be needed either way. Andrew, maybe you have some way in how can this be done, or based on Erigon, how it's implemented.
You are muted if you are.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of missed the context. So
okay, the idea is that withdrawals now touch a GNO token, right? And for GNO token to be correctly trackable, it needs to emit logs on transfers or anything, right? And we are not emitting them because this is not in a receipt, right? There's no receipt for this transaction being tracked. And how to fix that?
But the withdrawal contract, can it emit any logs?
Yes, it can, but the transaction is invoked in a context that there's no block transaction for it, right? So we currently don't store this receipt anywhere because there's no transaction for it. We could store it, but then we would either have, we could do it in two ways. Either we would have more receipts than transactions, and this can like break sync or break RPC a bit. Would need to adjust it in order to work. Or we can like put a placeholder transaction in a block just to keep this, but this transaction would still need to be handled in a special way in the node.
Well, I guess we can have some kind of artificial transaction. Well, we need to think how to handle it in the RPC, but it could be an artificial system transaction happening at the end of the block.
But it will need to be actually regenerated by the node. So in the block, it would be only placeholder for it, because we can't really trust the data there, because it's like it has higher privileges than normal transactions. So it would be a security risk if we just took it blindly. So it still would have to go with the current mechanism. It's just a placeholder that, okay, this will happen in the block.
But this is an issue to track like the change in GNOS supply.
Yes, I think so.
Well, not only the supply, because the supply is fixed, so that's not really an issue. But that's how most like tools in Exodus and whatever build the list of balances. So basically, so you know which address has how much GNO in an efficient way. Because if you don't do that, then you have to go through. Well, right now you would have to go through all events and also all withdrawals, and then some tools might not be compatible with that. And also, it related to the ERC20 like specification that requires transfer events to be emitted on well, when transfers occur that are not mints, that are not from the zero address. So yeah, I don't have a specific analysis of what tools might break because of this, but maybe there's also some, I don't know, I'm just spitballing, but some proof systems that may no longer work because you can't prove that you get the GNO through a transaction receipt or whatever. I mean, I don't know, but potentially it could break a lot of different tools. Yeah, so I don't know. Do you think it's something we should maybe study a bit more? And if so, should we schedule a brainstorming call or something soon to talk about this? Or should we just like go ahead with the hard fork and then see what happens, I guess?
So for me, it's so two things. For me, it depends how crucial this is, right? If this is crucial, then we need to do it. And in best way to do it, in my opinion, is to try prototyping it and see what breaks. So I would expect Ruben is not here today, but I would expect Ruben might be able to prototype it. I can brainstorm it with him, for example, internally. So on your side, I would say the question is, how crucial is it? And this is something that maybe you need to decide for yourself or talk with your users there a bit, like ask them, right? How big of a deal is it? And from our side, I think we can like try prototyping some potential solutions and see how bad is it or how good is it. Marek?
One thing, maybe you can talk with the Graph and Dune, and maybe you will know more what will break with this problem. That is the first thing. And the second is question to you, Łukasz. What do you want to prototype?
I would put an artificial transaction in that when processing block, normally we would just skip. And when we would be calling withdrawal contract, we will just check if we're calling it, we will generate that transaction, compare it to transaction in block. If it's the same transaction as the one we included in block, was included, we would just call it then, and we will just emit a receipt for it. So that's way we can have a transaction and receipt in a block, but it will be handled in a separate way. So it won't be handled.
You will change block hash and everything, basically, receipts,
exactly,
etc. And
exactly.
so CL will send you execution payload that doesn't match.
No. It will be in block, so it will match.
Okay, so we will change block production. Okay, in that way we could break maybe in future some builders, block builders, or not break, but it will be harder to introduce block builders for Gnosis.
Why?
Because
maybe yes, right? If you have very custom one, then yes. We'll need to support this.
Every block builder will need to support putting this custom transaction to the block.
But I expect the block builder to be using a client or modified version of a client that already supports Gnosis, right? I doubt someone will create a custom block builder for Gnosis right now because they need to support this withdrawals, right?
Yeah.
In the first place, right? Even all withdrawals, they need to support the block rewards. So they already have a custom block builder. So I don't see this as a big deal.
Yeah, the only thing is that implementation might be much more complicated than it was before, but
not really. I would say it's it can actually be pretty easy.
You will have different block production, right, for Gnosis and for mainnet.
We already have different block production for Gnosis and for mainnet. It's just another step there, another if that there's we find this transaction in block at the end, we skip it from normal processing, we go to withdrawals processing, we create new transaction compared to this transaction in block, they match, we execute this, and we pass that we generate receipts at this step. So it's not that big change.
Yeah, okay.
But it might not work, right? It's like in my head.
A bit late, yeah.
Yes, it will definitely need to be properly tested. It will definitely need another shadow hard fork, a test net. So it will definitely slow down the rollout.
Yeah, if we do not do it right now, it will
then we already break it. So if we do it later, we didn't really fix it. Right?
Right, so it's a difficult choice, basically. Either we delay everything and we make sure that GNO doesn't break, or it's broken forever.
Yes.
Yes. I think we should explore this idea more, for sure. before
Isn't,
committing to mainnet.
Is there a similar problem for the reward contract? So it's also done in a system kind of hidden transaction.
Good question.
But the reward contract is in XDAI, right?
Yes.
So this is not tracked anyways. So there's no events for this.
Well, a reward contract could emit events. So if we are doing this for withdrawals, I think we could do it for reward contract too, just to have same potential functionality, right? It's not a problem because it wasn't a problem, but maybe just for the sake of it, we could have the same thing, or we can ignore it, whatever. But potentially this could be also done for block reward contract. But it's not important for our use case.
Right. Okay, well then, maybe if you can think about this a bit more and just, I don't know, define maybe a spec or something that could fix this, or the best way you think this should be done, both at Erigon and at Nethermind, and then have a call together, like in a smaller committee soon. Yeah, just to analyze if it's actually possible, doable, and if it makes sense to do it and to delay the mainnet and all the extra work and everything. Because of course, at this point, the community is also waiting for the mainnet hard fork to happen, right? I would still very much prefer to have it be the right way, but maybe it's also a small edge case that is not that important. So I will try to analyze a bit all the tools and everything. Worst case, I mean, I'm sure that other ERC20 tokens also don't respect the spec exactly. So I don't know. I mean, it might not be that big of an issue. Yeah, so I'll try to find the tools we use and if they could break because of it. But still, let's already investigate this a bit to make sure that, I mean, if there's any solution, we might as well just do it, right?
So, yeah, I will talk with Ruben and we'll see if we can, we'll just prototype it, right? We just, we'll try doing it and testing it and see what happens.
Perfect. Well, how long do you think that would take?
So I don't really have time to code it, so it depends more on Ruben. I think he will be able to focus on it, but soon. But I need to like catch him and grab him and talk to him what he thinks about it. Maybe I'm missing something. So I don't know, few days, maybe a bit more, like up to a week.
All right. Well, then maybe we can talk about it next week on the Codevs call. Yeah, and then I know Lion also has some potential issues with changing the way blocks are built, because we want to stay as close as mainnet as possible. So yeah, I don't know, Lion, if you have more comments about that.
No, I think it's good that the plan we set of prototyping is fine. I don't have any specific issues beyond everything that we talked.
All right. Yeah, I mean, in this case, does it still make sense to select a mainnet hard fork date? I mean, it would, of course, be only if we don't implement this new GNO thing. Because if we do, then, of course, it can't be in the next month, but yeah.
I would say I would wait a week for doing that. So. For decision, because we don't want to announce decision that we de-announce, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, makes sense.
I don't think it's a good
agree.
idea to do that.
Maybe the situation will be resolved when we basically analyze the tooling and it turns out that there is no issue. So.
All right. So let's make sure that for next week we have a definitive answer of, is it doable? If so, is it worth it? And so we can set a date in, well, not necessarily set a date, but then know the next steps for sure. Do you think that's doable for next week?
Yeah, so from our side, we will analyze it on technical side, and you can analyze on your side tooling, and
Yes.
that sounds like a plan.
All right, perfect. Well, in this case, let's move on to Hive tests. I hear there's updates.
Hi, Felix. Yes. Regarding basic tests for withdrawals, we are checking that the balance is applied correctly to the address when the withdrawal is sent by the consensus client. We are sending transactions alongside withdrawals and checking that they are performing okay. We are also checking the storage of the withdrawals contract after the withdrawal is applied. Now, we are working on setting up sync and prior test, which will work in the next way. After we create a few blocks and transactions and withdrawals and so on, we connect other nodes to the network and get them to sync. And also in the case of the reorgs, after the creation of blocks, transactions, withdrawals, and so on, we can connect other nodes to create a sidechain and perform some reorgs on the chain. Once we get done that, we will work on add Erigon to the pipeline. So it would be great if Andrew could send us an updated way to run Erigon. It would be great. Yeah, that's all on Hive test. If you don't have any question.
All right. I hope I got everything because I have to train my words per minute on my keyboard. But yeah, I mean, if there's something to add, feel free to just add it on Telegram. Yeah, great. All right. Then let's move on to client team updates. I guess on Nethermind room said there's nothing major. Do you have maybe something else to add?
One thing, we released these fixes for Chiado with 1.19.2.
1.18.2.
18, sorry about that. 18. Right. And probably we plan to release 1.19 soon.
But there's also there was also a release for 1.19 for Chiado, but I don't know.
Yes, but it was only a release candidate. So we don't update it release candidate because we plan normal release for 1.19. For 1.18, so it's stable version, we released fixes for Chiado.
All right. All right, for Erigon?
No updates.
Okay. For Geth, I think Guillaume was able to join but can't talk, or his microphone isn't working or something. So he wrote the update on Telegram. So he's still working on coding the reward contract. He found 2 bugs and is currently working on a 3rd one. I don't know specifically which ones those are. And he'll post results in a bit. So hopefully next week, I guess. For Chain Intro, what gateway?
Yeah, you can copy paste what Igor already sent in Telegram, but I will duplicate. So last week mostly fixing Chiado RPC and other nodes that we have for Chiado, and also deploying the network for Gnosis Play project. As you see, we already did it for Chiado. Okay, not Chiado, but testnet, because it's another thing. We also expect to work on Block Explorer, the next thing, and then to move on to mainnet. That I think will take some time, and that's it.
All right, great. I guess that's it then. Please make sure everyone to check this this eventing, this GNO transfer eventing. And except for that, does anyone have any questions or comments?
I do have a very small question, but probably it's not for now, just for future. For the when we are close to the mainnet hard fork, do we have any plans for bridges? Like, do we touch them? Do we stop them? Do we keep them as they are? Like, because for Chiado we didn't do anything because we don't run bridges on Chiado. But I think for mainnet we should not forget about them.
Right. So I know there's a plan for this from the previous hard fork, but I wasn't there at that point, so I'm not quite sure. But I know there's some things planned. We've already talked about it with the bridges team on Gnosis side at least. I think last time at least they shut them down for a few days or hours. I don't remember. A few hours before and then a few days after to make sure that everything worked. So I suppose it would work kind of in the same way, but I'll talk to the appropriate teams once we set a date. All right, if that's it, then thanks for joining and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.